Hey everyone, this is Teresa from Base 10 Montessori, and today we are going to do our next lesson on embroidery, and that's going to be the French knot. Before we begin doing our French knots, I just want to show you some examples of what we use the French knots for. This is one I've recently finished. We use the French knots right here, and a lot of the times we use them as the center of flowers, so they are a very popular embroidery technique that come in handy for a lot of different projects. And here's what this one looks like. A lot of French knots here. And of course, with the words right here, we use them for dots for the words and sentences. Now, if we take a look at our instructions right here, it says the French knot will be color number 4. So right here we have color number 4. That's the color we're going to be using. And right here it's telling us to use 4 strands. So we're going to separate out 4 strands of color number 4. So here we are separating out 4 strands. Remember, there are 6 strands to your embroidery floss. So we're going to separate 2 and keep the 4. So now I have the needle threaded, and for the French knot, I definitely want to put a knot at the end of my embroidery floss. Usually I show that I don't make a knot. It's personal preference, but when it comes to a French knot, you really kind of need that knot to anchor it because you're going to be working with both hands to make this knot. So let's put a knot at the end of our embroidery floss today. All right, so here we are. We're ready to go with our first knot. Find that circle, and you're going to pull your thread all the way to the very end. Now, before we start our knot, I'm just going to let you know that I'm working with a very long string today, and that may create problems for people who are doing this for the first time. One of the troubleshooting tips for doing this is to work with a shorter string. So let's see how successful I am with this long string. And if it's difficult, if there's a lot of knots going on, if you're having difficulty, shorten your string up and that should help. So I'm going to set this down on the table because we're going to work with both hands. Now in the instructions for this particular kit, it says to wrap it around your needle just once. However, there are other patterns that are going to have you wrap it around the needle 2 or even 3 times. So make sure to check your instructions on each pattern that you go through and make sure that you are wrapping your needle the correct amount of time. Let me move this a little bit closer. Let me see if I can hold on to everything and get a little bit closer. So we're just wrapping the needle like this. And you do want your needle to be fairly close to your fabric. You don't want to wrap it all the way out here and then try to make your knot. That's going to create knots that you don't want. So don't get too far away from your work. When I'm teaching sewing to my students, I tell them work close to your fabric. So we don't want to be out here. We want to be nice and close. So here I have wrapped my thread once. I'm going to keep it very close to my fabric, and I'm going to put my needle into the fabric like that. So it's wrapped once and I put my needle in. And now we're going to apply the Goldilocks concept of not too tight, not too loose. We're going to get it just right. We don't want to pull too tight, but we don't want it to be loose either. And so this is why we have to put a knot on the back side, because you are working with both hands at the same time. And one thing we need to be very careful of as we go through this is to make sure we don't get any unwanted knots as we pull it through. So make sure that your embroidery floss is not tangled before you begin, and just go really slowly. And then pull. Let me show you what the back looks like. Just like that. And we're going to keep going. We're going to go on to our next dot. Let me make sure I get this focused. I apologize if I'm a little clumsy with my camera. I'm not used to demonstrating sewing and filming at the same time, so I feel a little clumsy doing this. It's harder than it looks to look at your camera or look at your sewing, and to do both at the same time, I don't quite have that skill mastered yet. So let's move on to our second dot. As you can see, I'm just a little bit on the outside. And that's because when I go to make the knot, I want to center it in the middle. So I'm a little off-sided to start with, and that's on purpose. So again, pull it all the way up. We're not going to pull too tight. Now, if you pull too tight, it's going to pull this first knot and tighten it. And you might not like the result if you do it. So just snug, it's just right. These are very delicate knots. So you need to apply that Goldilocks rule of just right. Not too tight, not too loose. All right, we're gonna wrap it once and get very close to our work and insert the needle. Let me see if I can do this just a little bit closer to the camera. Make sure it's nice and snug before you start pulling it all the way through. Not too tight, not too loose. And then make sure your embroidery floss is not tangled. Watch for tangles very carefully as you go slowly. Go nice and slow. Make sure there's no tangles. And there we go. There's the second knot. Let's do another one. And a little extra thread I don't need. All right, so let's finish up these last two knots together. Wrap it. Work close to your work. Go slow. Make sure to remove any tangles from your thread. Pull gently, not too snug. You don't want to pull tight on these. As you can see, I got a little tight on this one, and some of them are a little more loose. So as you can see, I'm not perfect at the French knot. I'm not super consistent in my knots yet. It's not my favorite stitch, but the more you practice, the more consistent you will be. And it just takes a little bit of practice to figure out how tight or loose to leave it. I got a little knot on the back here. Let's pull it out. There we go. Last one. Wrap it. Work close to your work. bring it down, snug it up just enough, not too tight, not too loose, and pull. Very slowly and gently pull it through. And there you go. That's the last one. Let's take a look at the back. This is what the back looks like. And as usual, I'm just going to weave it in, and I'm not going to tie a knot. And there we go. That is the French knot. We're all finished with that. Next lesson is the satin stitch.